Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and tonight I've got a doctor in the house, Dave McDonald, a roto doctor, great high-stakes player. He and Tony DiVincenzo finished top 5, I think, in the main event.
Yeah, 5th, yeah.
Yep. And seen Dave at First Pitch Arizona, NFBC in the spring in Las Vegas, and he's been on the show several times before, so great to have Dave back on. And Dave and I are going to talk about which players in the first 15 rounds, mostly. We'll talk about some other stuff too, but which players you should think twice about drafting due to their injury risk. But first, Dave, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure, my friend. Always hopeful that you'll ask me on for the Guardians / risk portion of your tour.
Well, you can do, you can. You're versatile. We've done catchers, we've done other stuff.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I just hadn't really touched on this type of thing yet this off season, and I know that I listened to your pod, you and the whole crew, you and Tony and Jake were on with Rob, and I know you're not necessarily drafting yet, but
yeah,
you're well-versed in this type of thing. And as someone who was very competitive down the stretch last year, you're well aware of which guys were banged up down the stretch last year. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, Dave and I are going to touch on, the first 15 rounds or so of recent ADP, see where potential landmines might be. And then we're going to close with a little bit of Guardians talk because Dave's a Guardians fan. But first, just broadly speaking, Dave, how do you approach risk in a competitive 15-team league? Are there types of players, types of risk you're more willing to take on than others? Are there certain parts of the draft where you're more likely to take on a little bit of risk? And then how does your approach to risk change depending on the stakes of the league or the size of the league?
Yeah. So I apologize to start off with, but it's going to be a long answer because despite what some people think about my thoughts on risk, it's actually very nuanced. So like to begin with, in the first 2 rounds, I don't take any risks, at least not any risks that I've perceived exist there. I want to start with 2 very solid building blocks. In the 3rd round, I'm willing to take some risk if it's the type of player who they have to be healthy to start with. There's a difference to me between a guy who's coming into the season potentially not being healthy and a guy who's injury prone. Now, unless you're talking about a guy like Byron Buxton, who he might as well come in injured already because we know that's going to happen. But let's take a guy like Corey Seager, for example. Obviously this is a guy who definitely has injury risk, but on talent, he's a 1st round talent. And he usually doesn't miss like an entire season. Like he'll usually miss, 20 or 30 games in the season or something like that. So you just kind of have to, if you want to take that risk, if there's nothing else in the 3rd round, let's say that you like, and you want to take that, I think you can. I just think you have to. Now, here's the other part of my risk plan. My risk management plan is if you're going to take that kind of a risk, you then have to commit to your middle infielder being a shortstop behind Seager. In my opinion, this is how I do it. And then I have to take someone like stable and someone who I think is solid, who if and when Seager misses time, I've got a shortstop that I can then move from middle infield to shortstop. So and also my second baseman also has to be steady because I can't be losing 2 middle infielders at the same time. So it's not just about taking risks. It's about managing where you take the risks in both in your lineup by position and where in the draft you take them. So I really try to take as few risks as possible in the first 5 or 6 rounds. And then it kind of just depends on where the talent falls compared to the risk. So, looking at this season, let's see, there's guys like Luis Robert going, 6th round ish. I think he's going. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, like that's a guy who, when he was in the second and third round, I avoided him like the plague. But now that he's like in the sixth round, where I know he's like that second, third round talent that I can get that late, if I don't see any risk coming in, and I really haven't dug into him specifically yet, but let's say I think he's going to be healthy coming into the year, that's the kind of guy who I might actually take. Outfield is also the most easily replaced position out there, at least for me, in my opinion, because there's three positions, right? You got left, center, and right. So it's kind of like three positions in one. So you're just going to have a bigger pool of players to pull from. So if your guy gets injured, you can slide someone else in and you're not screwed, whereas like catcher, your guy gets hurt, you're on the scrap heap in a 15-team league. You're not picking up, in most cases, anyone of consequence. So I'm always looking at where, I'm always assuming they're going to get hurt if they have that kind of injury prone track record. I drafted Byron Buxton last year because it was the first time he was actually like his draft price was palatable. Because I felt he was going like 7 to 8 rounds too early for years. And finally it was like, okay, now I can draft him assuming he's going to get injured and it's not going to make or break my season. And that's kind of how I approach the draft. Is I want to build a solid core with as few risks as possible and then take those risks later in the draft when I can. Rounds 20 to 30, I think you should be taking as many risks as possible. I don't think you should worry about having a backup at every position necessarily. Like, you should come into the season with a roster that you can play week one. But outside of that, I'm looking to just take shots on guys and hope I hit on a lottery pick or two, because if those are where you drop so many picks in your last 10 picks in the 15-team draft, like your hit rate is going to be like 25% maybe. And with those, if you have a massive hit on a guy, that could be like, you could be adding another first or second rounder to your team. And like, it's worth missing on like 6 or 7 guys to hit on 1 or 2 potentially there. So I think you should just go for the gusto when it comes to the last 10 picks. And that's where I like to take my risks. So if I have my first 20 picks, for the most part, are really solid, steady players that I can depend on. And then my last 10, I'm just taking these upside shots. You hit on 1 or 2 of them and you can really take off. I mean, the teams that, added or drafted late, like Brent Rooker last year, like every year you've got hitters who stand out early in the season. I remember when Max Muncy was a rookie, his batted ball numbers were off the charts early on and a lot of people picked him up. And, guys like those can be league winners. When it comes to drafting early in drafts, I avoid early as in like early in the drafting season. So like December, January, even February, before training camp, I'm staying away from starting pitchers in the first 5 rounds pretty much, because there's going to be guys who come to training camp that we don't know are injured yet, because information won't come out until March pretty much. By the time we draft our main events in Vegas, we'll have a lot more information on starting pitchers, and they become a little bit more, we have more knowledge on them where we can then have more confidence drafting them a little higher. I'm probably not drafting any starting pitchers in the first 3 rounds this year. I'm just going to put that out there right now, for a variety of reasons. But I don't think you need that. I think starting pitchers are more about finding the right skill sets, and you can do that throughout the draft. I think there's a lot of value to be had in those kind of some of those mid-round guys. And like last year, I was all about Logan Gilbert, took him in the 4th round because I was convinced he was basically like a second-tier ace that you could get a round or 2 too late. And I think every year we have those guys. There's a couple of guys I'm looking at in like the 60 ADP range right now, 60 to 100. There's a lot of guys I like in that range. So I want to load up on bats early and then kind of switch to the starting pitchers after that. And you were talking about different types of risks because, it's not just injuries. So there's injury risks, but then there's also playing time risks. And then when you talk about closers, there's, job performance and, whether you keep your job kind of risks, and there's platoon risks. And yeah, you just got to balance all of that. You got to be looking at your team and not just drafting a guy because you like him, but drafting a guy because he fits into your team, and his skill set fits into your team. And then, like, especially with the stolen base guys, you've got those guys who aren't actually good baseball players. So I avoid those kind of guys who just steal bases, but they suck as hitters, because a lot of them lose their jobs. And I'm trying to draft early on in drafts, like in my first 3 picks, if I take 3 hitters, which I plan to, probably 2 of them steal bases. Probably one of them is going to be stealing 30 to 40 bags, and another one maybe stealing 15 to 20, hopefully at least. And then the third one can be whatever. But I'm not trying to chase steals throughout the draft where you get to a point where, people want to avoid steals and then just dump it all with like a guy that they're hoping is going to steal 70 bases, but he sucks as a hitter. And I mean, there's been tons of guys over the years, but like Michael Bourne, that kind of player. I know he's not relevant anymore, but that's the kind of guy who I never draft. They hurt you in RBIs and home runs and likely to lose their job. Miles Straw, that kind of guy. We're very familiar with him in Cleveland. So I don't know. That's kind of, there's a lot more to it than that even, but there's just so many things you have to think about. It's kind of like putting together a puzzle, and you got to fit all the pieces together and not just try to jam a bunch of pieces that don't fit together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. And you and I are going to agree, I think, a lot. We might disagree about a handful of players, but general philosophy, I really don't have a ton to add there. I mean, that's part of what I loved about the Rotosaurus pod when you guys first started up back in the days. I just was like, yeah, we're in lockstep with a lot of this stuff. And, I would definitely kind of come in on what you were saying about, taking the risks in rounds like 20 to 30, but especially just avoiding risk for me in like the first 10 to 15 rounds. There might be a certain player in the first 15 rounds where I know there's risk and I think it's worth it. But to me, like any pitcher, any closer I'm taking in the first 10, 12 rounds, that's a risk, just taking not a position player that's established, right? So like if you start adding in injured pitchers on top of the early closer or whatever that you're already taking, then all of a sudden you get to round 13, 14, and you've got 3 or 4 like fairly risky players on your roster. So like I definitely agree with that. And
I think there's this
just getting it later, I guess.
Yeah. And I think there's this, I think there's 2 kinds of people, 2 types of philosophies when it comes to the starting pitcher risks. And I think there's the people who think that they all have risks so that we should just say, screw it, draft the best guys and, it's all the same. And then there's other people who look at it and say, well, no, like there are different levels of risks. So like, there's guys like Joe Ryan who has a lot more risk, than, Framber Valdez, in my opinion, or whatever. So, but all pitchers do have some risk. Like that is true. There's nobody that you can draft that you can guarantee, like you can't guarantee that anyone's going to not get hurt. Right. But it's all about probabilities. It's okay. This guy, I feel, has far less of a chance of getting hurt than this guy. So I don't want to add, because that inherent risk is already there with the starting pitchers. I don't want to compound that risk by drafting riskier guys who are coming in with injuries or coming in with a checkered injury track record, because that only makes it worse. I think it's kind of lazy analysis for people to just say they all have risks, so just draft the best guy. I think that's just incredibly lazy, honestly.
And I'll also add, you were talking about not wanting to use those really early picks on starting pitchers before they start throwing in spring training. I definitely agree with that. And I have no idea if I'm going to take a pitcher in round 2 in a main event or round 3 in a main event, but I will definitely not be taking a starting pitcher in round 2 of like a draft and hold that I might start around Christmas. The injury, like the hottest time of the year for pitcher injuries is spring training.
It's when they start ramping up, of course. Yeah. You also asked different types of leagues. So I kind of treat all leagues like, in terms of monetary entry fees, I kind of treat them all the same, whether it's a whether it's a $2,500 league or a $100 league, I'm there to win. I'm not there to, well, I'll be honest with you. Outside of Glarf, I don't play any leagues that are under $250 a league just because I only have so much bandwidth that I can, handle these leagues that it's just not worth it for me to enter a league that's less than $250 entry fee unless it's Glarf. That's the one exception. I had to stop doing TGFBI and stuff like that. Like I can't, it's, when you're doing over 10 leagues for me anyways. And some people, Zach can do 237 leagues and that's great for him. I don't know how that kid does it. But I cannot do that. So I have a problem even doing more than 2 or 3 fab leagues. Like that's pretty much where I'm at. So, but it is different. I do approach different types of leagues differently. So like Yahoo leagues, for example, that have daily changes, daily lineup changes and IL slots, and they're super shallow. So that the replacement value on the wire is really high. I'm definitely willing to take more risks and earlier in those types of leagues, just because the downside isn't nearly the same as a 15-team NFBC main event league or something like that. Because, what's on the wire in those leagues is like, those guys will never touch my roster in a Yahoo league because there's so much replacement value there, and there's IL slots, and if a guy's not playing, I'm not getting a 0 for the week. I can just bench him for the day and move someone else in. So you definitely need to. I have a definite strategy for every type of league, whether it's a Yahoo league, a Fantrax league, an NFBC league, a main event compared to a super. There's different strategies involved. So you have to approach them all differently and really put thought into what makes sense and how to approach them.
All right. Well, let's give the people what they want, and let's start talking about some actual players here. So we're going to go round by round. I used basically the last month worth of 15-team NFBC draft champions ADP, which is 13 drafts. And Dave and I basically made notes of players in the first 15 rounds that we thought might be worth hitting on. I actually did not specifically highlight anyone in round 1, but Dave did. So Dave, who do you want to discuss in round 1 of NFBC ADP that people might want to maybe take a second look at due to the risk associated with potential injury?
Yeah. And so I'm not necessarily saying, that you can't or shouldn't draft these guys. Like there's nobody, like you were saying, that nobody jumps out at me in round 1 as, okay, this is an easy fade. But I do think that, kind of along the lines of what we were talking about with pitching, and one of the things that I have realized is, the high velocity pitchers, and for whatever reason, in my research, it seems like the threshold is 96.3 miles an hour. And I'm sure it's just a sliding scale where the higher it goes, the more risk there is. But guys who consistently throw their fastball, especially 97 miles an hour plus, I definitely think they have added risk. And 2 of those guys are going in the first round in Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens. And I think that alone is enough to scare me off. And I'm not saying, it's possible that they stay healthy this year, but I would bet heavily that they're going to have a somewhat significant injury, like a 2 to 3 month injury or more, either this year or next year. I think, like in my research, the guys who managed to stay healthy for 1 year who threw at that velocity, the next year they did not. So, those 2 it's just, I'm not looking to build that way that early. Skubal also had an 112 innings pitch jump from 2023 to 2024. So he's a great pitcher. Dude's awesome. It could work out in a Yahoo league where I have IL slots and replacement. It's possible I take that risk. In a main event, I don't see myself taking either of those guys. What are your thoughts?
I agree with the last thing you said. I probably won't take Skeens or Skubal in a main event. I think the 96.3 mile an hour thing, I 100% agree that, guys that throw hard, to me, I analyze prospects. And the three things I hate is when a guy is young and skinny and throws that hard, because it's just, guys that start dealing with injuries when they're 18, 19 and they're throwing 95, 96 and they're 6'1", 180 pounds or whatever.
Tristan McKenzie.
It just always ends up with them just not having a long career. When you're talking about a Paul Skeens, I don't think everyone's 100 miles an hour necessarily has the exact same strain on the arm. I think, if I were to take a pitcher in the middle of the first round, I'd want that pitcher to basically be Paul Skeens and have his arsenal, because I know that this is what a absolute monster number one starter looks like. But I 100% recognize the risk associated with just kind of throwing away the velocity and just saying, like, I'm just taking this guy, he's not going to get hurt. Like, obviously you could get hurt. But if you want to take a pitcher in the first round, you're probably taking a guy who's throwing that hard, right? So, and if you want a guy that's going to finish as a top 3 or top 5 overall starting pitcher, a lot of the times they're throwing that hard. So, and I think guys are going to keep throwing harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
So I don't just avoid guys that throw that hard as like a rule. Like I've taken Logan Gilbert in a draft champions already because I thought to me, I thought he was like the 3rd most talented or 4th most talented pitcher on the board. And the price was good enough that I was willing to look the other way on the velocity, just because there hasn't been a recent injury. But like, if you're talking about middle of the first round, even late first round, I'm kind of with you on those guys. But it's undeniable how good those guys are.
Sure.
But I agree that they are, like, it's more likely to me that Tariq Skubal gets injured in mid-April and is done for the year than like Aaron Savali. But it's obviously more complicated than that.
Right.
Now, is there anyone else you wanted to touch on from round 1?
Oh, I was also just going to say real quick. So the difference between, like, Gilbert kind of is barely over the threshold. Like, he's in like 96.8, kind of like Paul Skeens is closer to 99. I look at Jacob deGrom when he kind of jumped from, 2019 to then the short season in 2020, he upped his velo. And then he upped it even more in 2021 to throw in like 99. And then immediately all the injury issues started happening at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just don't know that anybody, no matter skinny, fat, anything in between, is able to throw 98, 99 miles an hour for a significant amount of innings without getting hurt. So we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of why I'm staying away from those. But the other one was, and I don't think I'm staying away from this guy. I just wanted to see what you thought about it. But, Corbin Carroll with his shoulder injury, granted, he was healthy last year, but his first pretty much every month until August was brutal, like just horrendous. And you could tell that the shoulder was definitely having an impact on his swing plane. I think he's good to go for this year. And I really want him to be, because I think you're basically going to get a guy who could be a top, 6 roto player, probably closer to like pick, 11, 12, 13, something like that. Where do you fall on Corbin Carroll?
I've got 0 concerns for 2025.
Okay.
If I had to isolate a position player in the first round that I might avoid due to durability concerns, it would be probably Tatis. Just because I think he misses more time than the rest of these guys regularly. And but I didn't highlight anyone going in round 1 as like a avoid due to injury necessarily.
Okay. So then Corbin Carroll, 0 concerns. Would he be a target for you then in the first?
Absolutely. I've taken him in multiple drafts already. So.
Okay. All right. No, it's same for me. I haven't drafted yet, but he's the guy who I kind of picked out as he would be my target, I think, if I didn't get a top 6 or 7 pick.
Yeah, I think he's just his game is built for roto. Obviously, you're gonna take a power hitter with maybe 2 power hitters with your next 2 picks. But
I think that's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to
Yeah.
find guys who give you power in the second and third rounds than it is to find a guy who can steal 50 bags, but still give you some power as well.
Right. All right. Round 2. We have more notes under round 2. Obviously, Ronald Acuna is now going in round 2. I mentioned that he's right now, like in those 13 drafts that I kind of isolated this data for, he's the 5th player off the board in round 2, going after Zach Wheeler, Jackson Chourio, Jordan Alvarez, Vlad Guerrero Jr. in the second round. On November 5th, Alex Anthopoulos said it doesn't look like Acuna will be ready for opening day. If he returned from this ACL surgery as fast as he returned from his other ACL surgery to the other knee, he would be ready for round opening day. So if Anthopoulos is being forthright, then presumably they're just giving him extra time this time around. Obviously, I think you would agree that Anthopoulos saying that on November 5th doesn't necessarily mean that much, but just kind of, what do you see as sort of the risk level with taking Ronald Acuna in the early second round?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I want my first 2 picks to be solid. I think this is a potential Yahoo pick because I can throw him on my IL slot until he comes back, and there's plenty of good replacement value players that I can pick up after putting him on the IL. But in a main event, I don't like stashing guys. I don't like stashing guys unless I know it's a short-term stash, and I'm pretty convinced that they're not going to be affected by that injury when they come back. I mean, you're talking about an ACL injury. Do we think that that's not going to affect his running, his power? And how long will it affect him for? Will it take him a month or 2 to kind of get right? Will he ever get right? That's in the whole season, and I think a lot of people are saying, well, it's the former number 1 overall pick that you can get in the second round. Yeah, but are you getting that same guy? I don't know. I'm not convinced. So, I think I'd rather take Jackson Merrill over him, honestly. For like a main event purpose anyways, I don't want to draft a guy who's starting on the bench, and especially like if he's saying now that he doesn't think he's going to be ready for opening day, then that's because usually they're overly optimistic. Usually it's, we hope he'll be ready for opening day. If they're saying he's probably not going to be ready, then he's definitely not going to be ready. And
worth pointing out that the first year back from the prior ACL surgery was by far his worst power season, just by far. Like he hadn't had an ISO under 230 before that, and then he had a 148 ISO. Mm-hmm. And he missed time throughout the year with sort of nagging stuff, and then he started missing time with knee soreness towards the end of that year. So even if it's just like, I think he's going to be back by April 15th, like you're not out of the woods, like once he's back on April 15th or whatever. So I'm not really interested in Acuna this year. Jordan Alvarez, we both kind of just made note of the fact that his knee, it's always kind of been the knee or both knees, different knees, which knee it was this time. I don't really care, but like, he's always just been top 5 hitter on the planet, massive guy with knee problems. So the risk is kind of obvious there. Is that an avoid for you in the middle of the second round?
Yeah, I mean, he's had old man knees since he was like 23, I think. And I went back in RotoWire's news to look back to see how far back the knee issues went, at least with the news, and it was 2019. So I was like, yeah, it's pretty much been since he's been a major leaguer. But the thing is with him is I'm not super concerned. Like if you look at his plate appearances since 2021, 598, 561, 496, 635. He hasn't hit less than 31 homers. He's a 290 to 310 hitter. I don't, I know it might sound odd coming from me, but that's not something that's super scary. I think it's kind of like less risk than a Corey Seager probably, where, you're getting really good stats. I wouldn't take him in the first round, but if you're talking about in the second round, if I can plan my team around him, if I'm getting my steals elsewhere, if both of my other two guys are rock solid, then I don't think I really have a problem with taking Jordan.
Yeah, I think I don't expect to have a ton of him, but it's not because of the knee as much as it is just the statistical profile. Like I do shouts to John Fish, but I do kind of want aces and bases at that 1-2 turn. If it's bases and bases, that's cool. I'm not going to go aces and aces, but right. I did take Jordan Alvarez in one of my 2 main events in the second round last year. And I hated everything about the pick at the time. And I was just like, look, this is like, he's by far the best hitter available. Like J-Ram was off the board and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say I definitely won't take him in a league, but it's an outfielders who don't run. That's just not what I want to do with a second round pick necessarily. But I'm not that worried about the knee. Especially with just the ability to DH him. Now, I touched on like Jazz Chisholm. He's going late second round. He's averaged about 100 games a year over the past 3 seasons.
Yeah.
I'm avoiding him at this price. I was wrong to avoid him for this reason at his price last year, but I don't know if it I forget what his stats were before the trade to the Yankees. That fade might have still worked out if he hadn't got traded there, but
so he had 13 homers, 22 steals, 249 average in 430 plate appearances. He pretty much matched that in half the plate appearances with the Yankees. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like going to the Yankees definitely significantly improved his outlook. I mean, going from SunTrust, or is that, I can't remember which field is which. Is that Miami's field, SunTrust?
Oh man, that sounds right.
It's either that one or it's Atlanta's. I can't remember.
That's like the field I would be least likely to be able to name.
That's all right. Whatever the hell Miami's field is called. Going from there to Yankee Stadium, obviously.
It's Dave. It's Lone Depot Park, and it's a lowercase L for the loan. So Lone Depot Park.
Okay. Yeah, going from that park to Yankee Stadium is obviously something you couldn't have seen coming, and it was a huge boom. But we all knew Jazz could do that, right? Like that, seeing that he had 621 plate appearances. It was the first time that he's had over 500 plate appearances in his career. It's just what you don't want to do is take injury-prone guys like Jazz coming off of a career year.
Exactly.
It's the worst thing to do.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, longtime listeners will know I love Jazz from his prospect days, and then I only kind of got off of him due to the durability issues, because it just reminded me so much of Byron Buxton, just because they have the exact same kind of body where it's just all skinny and all athleticism and
he's a super aggressive player. He kind of reminds me like Grady Sizemore, like he's always running into things. Like when he's in the outfield, he's running into walls. He's slide, like he's injuring himself on slides.
They don't have big enough bodies to throw him around the way they do.
Exactly.
And so, second round Jazz, no thanks.
Yep.
We both mentioned Rafael Devers just because second half, he was basically banged up the entire second half with issues on both shoulders. Affected his play. He played through it. The team's already talking about moving him to first, which is just like, I knew this day would come, but for them to be publicly saying that at this point before this season, it's just like, and I also look at third base. It's just one of the most loaded positions in the top 100 or so. So,
yep.
I loved Devers last year. I thought he was a good end of the second round, 4 category option, but the price is the exact same, and I think the risk is up.
100%. Yeah, he missed time 3 different times with shoulder soreness, and then they shut him down at the end. He didn't have any kind of operation that I know of. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think that, they're going to the offseason, so they'll get healthy. It doesn't always work that way. It really depends on the injury, and a lot of times my assumption is always, I assume there's still an issue if they don't get it fixed. If they get the procedure and the amount of time that they need to go by for them to be fully recovered from that goes by, then I'm back in. But in this case, I don't know that he's okay. You know, like you said, both shoulders. He also had knee issues pop up multiple times last year as well. And, I think that the change in position is probably because they're realizing that he's not holding up physically. And, I think it's a bad time to invest in Devers.
I also think that guys that are sort of his size, like he's not quite as big as Prince Fielder, but like guys that are sort of that size, their primes are like mid-20s, and then it kind of falls off a cliff like at 29, 30 at some point. So,
yeah. How old is Devers now? Is he? I thought he's like 28, 29.
Yeah, he's like, he should have another prime year or two in there, but
28. Okay.
Kind of, he's like, I think I don't know if he's going to ever have a year again that was as good as like 2022 or even last year when he was playing through that stuff in the second half because of how good his first half was.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made a note of a guy. We're moving to round 3.
Yeah.
The guy you made a note of in round 3 is actually the highest in ADP of these round 3 guys. Emmanuel Clase is the second player off the board on average in round 3, in between Austin Riley and Matt Olson. What are potential concerns people should have about Emmanuel Clase here early in round 3?
Honestly, I don't know if there are. And this is something that I don't think there's going to be any information. That's kind of what worries me. But I watch the Guardians closer than I watch any other team, obviously. And I was at some of those games down the stretch that he blew several saves, and then in the playoffs again, like the velocity definitely was significantly down. This is a guy who really doesn't dip down below 100 miles an hour. And if he does, it's like 99. And I saw him throwing some pitches at like 95, 96 at times. And like his fastball, not like, a changeup. And I don't know. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it was just, it was getting a little cooler out, a little colder weather, but it was like a pretty significant drop in velo. And he was really getting hit hard. I hope as a Guardians fan that there's nothing going on there. And like I said, the problem is I don't think I'm going to find out. And I don't think I'm going to be taking a closer in round 3 anyways, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with him. And I do have there's just like that something in the pit of my stomach telling me there could be something potentially wrong there that we don't know about yet.
Yeah. I watched some of those playoff games and he just looked so gassed.
And it could have been that too, because they definitely used the shit out of him.
That's kind of my operating assumption. Of course, you can maybe get injured because you're pitching while you should be resting. And he does throw extremely hard. I've rostered him plenty of times over the past few years, but he's probably going to need Tommy John surgery at some point, just given how hard he throws. But I don't think to me, he's not like a void due to injury risk, more about just, do you want to take a closer there? But I definitely I noticed what you're talking about, but to me, it just looked like he was being asked to do too much. Now round 3 also has Jacob deGrom kind of going, first 5 picks or so of round 3 on average. And, he hasn't topped 95 innings since 2019. But that's kind of a tough sample to sort of say that about, when it was kind of like he was pitching through an injury, like that whole time. And then he finally got the Tommy John surgery. But
I knew he needed Tommy John like a year before he got it. It's like they kept trying to him pitch through it.
Like at least a year.
Maybe a year and a half. And I kept telling people like, don't draft him. This is ridiculous. And obviously you quoted since 2019, 2020 is a short season.
Right.
He was incredibly dominant in 2020, and then The problem I see is that he upped his velo again in 2021. And like I said, I don't think you can do that. Like, he's throwing the ball too freaking hard. But you could also argue that he's coming off of Tommy John. It's the healthiest he's been since 2020, I'm not, here's the thing. I don't think you draft him assuming he's going to be the past dominant Jacob deGrom. You can't do that. I don't, people are going to be like, oh, he's built different. You always hear that excuse and blah, blah, blah. No, expect regression from his prime self. But in the third round, if you're looking to take a starter at that point, a guy who's coming off of Tommy John, who should be healthy now, I don't like taking Tommy John returnees, but he did come back at the end of last year. So, it's well past the point of return. So, while I don't expect prime DeGrom, I don't know. Third round might not be terrible. I'm probably still not going to do it. But how much riskier is he than Garrett Crochet going in the third round or something like that? I don't know. I think I'd probably take DeGrom there.
I would definitely take DeGrom over Crochet.
Yeah.
I think I would take Sale over DeGrom, who's going.
Oh yeah, I would take Sale.
I don't think I'm taking Kirby or Burns in the third round.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I think.
What about Blake Snell versus DeGrom? I'd probably take Snell. It's a close one though.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go Grom over Snell actually.
Okay.
But I don't think I think I'm just kind of passing on this general range. Maybe I take Sale if he stays in the third round there.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think, I appreciate how you're not, the people that want to mischaracterize Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave's willing to change his tune on a guy like Jacob deGrom.
Well, that's how they're going to see it, but it's not really changing my tune. I didn't want to
sorry for the,
yeah. No. And that's the thing. I go into every season. I don't carry biases with me from one season to the next. If I can hate someone one season and then love them the next, it just depends on their situation and their draft price. So yeah, I was out on him when he was hurt, and now that he got the operation that he needed, I could potentially be back in. But third round is pretty high still.
And you mentioned earlier in your opening statement that Corey Seager, I would push back on him being a first rounder on like talent a little bit just because of the lack of speed. But I'm not taking Corey Seager in the third round. Like he's a shortstop who doesn't run, and he's going to miss probably 30, 40 games. But I think you outlined exactly how you should play it if you do want to take him there. I don't like it from a roster construction perspective.
Totally get that. Yeah.
Durability risk perspective, but
yeah. And honestly, thinking about, I was wrong to say first round talent, more second round. Like, he's basically Jordan Alvarez. I mean, they're very similar players with similar risks, but like you said, if you're looking for speed from your shortstop position, then that's an issue with him. Whereas, obviously Jordan not running from first base or outfield rather, is not really an issue. But I think you can build around either of them. I think you can take Seager. I'm not saying he's a target. I'm just saying he's not in a void for me either.
Sure. And then, Mike Mager came on a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Garrett Crochet. I'm avoiding him just because it's really last year is the only time he's even tried to pitch a starter's amount of innings in a season. So, and he didn't even try to do it the final 2 months. So, he could definitely pay off a third round pick. That I just don't like taking picks like that where I'm just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping for the best, Well,
and essentially, unless you're taking a starter in your first two picks, he's going to be your ace. I think Crochet could be a great number 2. And in the fourth round, I might be a buyer. But I think, again, it's just It's just they're just going a little too high for me. It's a round or two too high.
Yeah, so just prior to last season, Crochet's top innings in a year were 65 innings at Tennessee in 2019.
In college.
Yeah. Okay, round 4.
Yeah.
We've only got one player mentioned here. I actually didn't put him down. I almost kind of view him, he didn't come back. He didn't come back from his elbow surgery, so it wouldn't be fair to call him like the DeGrom of relief pitchers, but Felix Bautista. Do you want to talk about like what he's attempting to return from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not hearing, and I mean, granted, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts this time of the year yet, but I'm not hearing much chatter about the risks of Felix Bautista. Like people, like the fact that he's going in the 4th round is kind of crazy to me. Like he had Tommy John, and then he also is coming off of a second elbow surgery in early 2024. So it's like, what are we just assuming he's going to be fine coming into 2025? Like, I don't know, man. 2 elbow surgeries, a closer, his control, the big thing with Tommy John guys is their control is the thing that takes the longest to come back. That could be a problem when it comes to being a closer. If you're walking a lot of guys, that's generally no bueno. So that's not where I'm going in the 4th round. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I haven't taken him yet. So maybe I'm cautious enough that he's just not an option for me there. I definitely hear everything you're saying. It's how many of these early closers do we feel good about? He obviously has more risk factors than really any of them going that high, but he also probably has shown the highest ceiling of any of them going that high. I'm kind of agnostic on Bautista in the 4th round, I think.
Yeah, see, I like 4th, 5th. I wouldn't be a buyer in the 5th, maybe not even the 6th. I don't know. I'm way off at that price, but I also I'm not looking for a home run pick and a closer in general. Like there have been some years where you get a guy, like a Josh Hader, elite season, where he strikes out 125 guys or whatever and saves 40. But really, with my closers, I'm just looking to get 2 guys who I can rely on to keep the job for most of the season. That's really what I'm trying to do. And I'm not, it's not about if the guy has a little bit better skills when he's healthy, and because he's not going to be prime Felix Bautista, in my opinion. Like I don't think you're just going to get that guy back. I think it's going to be a lesser version coming back from those 2 surgeries.
All right, we didn't mention anyone in round 5, so
no one stood out to me when I just
everyone just draft with confidence in round 5. But in round 6, we've got Joe Ryan, who you mentioned earlier. Obviously, suffered a grade 2 shoulder strain in early August. I'm surprised by the price here.
It's shockingly high.
I really like Joe Ryan when he's healthy, but
right.
This is kind of pushing it in terms of like, I feel like you're kind of expecting just best version of Joe Ryan next year, like pretty much.
That's what I see like with a lot of these prices. It's just like, are we just pretending like they're going to be, like I always say, the injured version of a player is not that player. Like you can't just, when Jacob deGrom needed Tommy John, he wasn't Jacob deGrom. He was a lesser version of Jacob deGrom. And it's the same thing with this. It's not, you're not getting Joe Ryan. You're getting a lesser version of Joe Ryan. And is that worth a 6th round pick? No, definitely not.
I mean, he's going like 8 picks on average, or maybe 9 picks on average later than like Bryce Miller, 3
crazy.
picks later than Bailey Ober. Like, you can get kind of similar skill guys that aren't injured.
Right.
Same range. So you mentioned Luis Robert earlier as well.
I did.
I think he skates more than any like big name position player for how often he's injured.
You think he what?
I think he skates. Like I think it just doesn't follow him as like a reputation thing. Like that he misses as much time as he does. Because I think people like I've heard multiple people talk about how excited they are to take Robert there, and I don't like how many games would you project Luis Robert to play this year?
Well, I mean, I've always been on the opposite side. I've always been the guy fading Luis Robert because his price was in like the third round, maybe second round at times. Now that it's in the sixth round, though, yeah, I mean, like, he'll probably miss some games, and I'm not saying like I'm excited, but he's a guy who has a 30-30 profile if things break right, or at least 30-20. I don't think his 224 average last year is indicative of the hitter he is. What I guess do you think that he's Byron Buxton? Like, do you think that he's just definitely going to miss time, or is there?
I think he's like Royce Lewis. Like,
you think he's already in Royce? See, Royce Lewis to me is in Byron Buxton territory. I don't put Robert there yet.
Luis Robert has played over 100 games once. He's hit over 15 home runs once. He's never stolen 25 bases. Like I don't get why like there. I don't know. I said what I said, but I don't get Luis Robert.
In the sixth round though, I mean, like we're not talking about having to take him in the third or fourth here. Like, I don't know. I just don't feel like that profile. I mean, yeah, you can look at the projections and say, okay, the games are too high. They're projecting for 150, 154 games, but like 28 homers, 27 steals with a 245 average. And I think that average is probably on the low end. Honestly, my biggest concern with Robert is being in that environment. Like, obviously, that team, the vibes are not good on the White Sox. Doesn't seem like people want to be there. So that's one of my biggest concerns with Luis Robert. If he gets traded somewhere else, I would be very, very into him. But I don't know. I just don't see that profile that late very often.
I hear you.
But yeah, you do have to plan around it. You have to say, okay, you're going to probably miss some games here. So, but again, he's an outfielder. That's something that I'm not as concerned about missing.
I do. I mean, I think the round is more important to me than the position with him. Like, cause it's just the types of players I can take in that round instead of him. Like there's so many outfielders later that are power speed guys that are going to hit 245, 240. I don't like the swing there.
That's fair. I mean,
Hunter Green mentioned, I almost included him. But just since he made a return late last season, I thought the sixth round, I'm probably not going to take him, just being honest, but how risky do you think he is there in the sixth round?
Hunter Green?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, he's definitely a high velo guy. And he was a guy he was the last one on my list of guys. So I had like this list that like guys in my, that I shared with people in my Twitter chat. And, it was like all the guys, the high velo guys who were pretty much like crossing off the list as each one went down with an injury last year, Bobby Miller and, Garrett Cole and, all of them one by one, Glasnow. Hunter Green was the last one holding out. And I'm like, I can't believe this guy is staying healthy and everybody else is getting hurt. And then, at the end of the season, he missed a month with an elbow injury, but he did return at the end of the season. But one thing I've noticed is that a lot of times these guys will miss time with an injury and then they'll come back and then they'll get hurt again. So I'm not, saying that there's zero risk now with him just because he returned at the end of the season. I'm still going to be avoiding Hunter Green this year.
Yeah, I will too. I didn't mention him just because I didn't think he's just like. I just think it's he throws too hard. He pitches in Cincinnati like that. That's kind of my reasoning, but he's extremely talented. Like if Hunter Green threw 175 innings or something, like he could be a top 10 pitcher.
Yeah.
Seventh round, you noted one player who I thought about mentioning him as well, but who did you want to talk about in the 7th round?
Grayson Rodriguez. He's a guy that I'm seeing a lot of people still in on, and I am very out on him for this year. He was shut down with a lat injury in early August. The GM claims that he's healthy in mid-November. We know what that means. So, I just think there's a good chance he's going to miss more time this year, possibly significantly more. And also, there's a chance. I mean, his velo went down from 97.4 to 96.3 last year. Kind of feels like he's on the Luis Castillo track a little bit, where Luis Castillo's velo kept going down from 96 or from 97 to 96 to 95, and his efficacy went down with it. And I don't know. I mean, maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be good to go. But again, just because he's having an off season of rest doesn't mean that he's going to come back and be good to go for next year. So I won't be paying that price for Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah, I'd love to see him pitching in spring training before taking him in a March draft. I thought, I think 7th round, I'm probably not going to take him, but like I thought that there was enough of a kind of discount there, and the injury isn't as scary to me as some of the other ones we've talked about.
I mean, he's going only a couple picks after guys like Logan Webb, Spencer Schwellenbach, Hunter Brown, Sonny Gray goes after him. I'd take all of those guys well before Grayson, personally.
I'd take them all over him. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm iffy on Sonny Gray just because of how good it, like him just coming off a career year, and he's pretty old. But the price isn't crazy. All right, round 8, Royce Lewis. We mentioned him in passing. Let me just talk about. I think we're probably on kind of the same page, although I'm probably more open to it depending on the price. But suffered a quad strain opening day. Missed a little over 2 months, then missed a little over 3 weeks in July with an adductor strain, and his production in between the injuries was epic, and then his production after the adductor strain was terrible. Hit 207, slugged 350, and then he's obviously had the 2 ACL surgeries. So Dave, I know you don't draft early, but
yeah,
Royce Lewis was going like, on NFBC where you can see the charts of where guys are going. It's a kind of a steep downward red line as more drafts have happened. The ADP is just sinking like a rock with Royce Lewis. And he went outside. He's starting to go outside the top 150.
Wow.
Which would be, about 100 picks later than he was going in a lot of the super early drafts. So I'm monitoring the price. Like I would absolutely take Mark Vientos, Junior Caminero, those guys over him. But I think while people are probably right about the injury risk, I think the potential that he brings to the table is probably being a little bit forgotten just because of how bad he was after the adductor injury. But we don't have to talk about him too much, but I whole season.
I think you're right. And so he was a massive avoid for me last year. I thought like that was a very obvious injury avoid last year, but this year I'm actually surprised that his price has come down to where it is now. In my, I know we had talked about using different ADP here, but the one that I had initially put on here was he had him at pick like 114. I think it's close to being right. I'd probably take him a little bit after that. Like I'd probably take Jake Berger over him. But if you put him down around like 135 and definitely 150, I might be a buyer at that point. Like he's a massive talent. I would take him over some of those guys, going like, in like Matt Chapman. I like Matt Chapman, but Royce Lewis can be a much bigger impact player for me. around pick 135. And if he's going 150, yeah, I'm interested at that point. So I'm not necessarily out on him. It just kind of depends on where he falls. I feel like he's the kind of guy who, if he's healthy in spring training, you're going to see his price jump up a bit, though.
Yeah, I think there could be kind of people buying the dip type of thing there, but
yeah.
Okay, Tyler Glasnow ended the season on the shelf with a sprained elbow. Just an extreme avoid for me.
But no, James, it's okay. He says his elbow's fully healthy as of early November, so he's good.
I saw that. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
For those who just fell off the turnip truck, Tyler Glasnow is healthy and good to go. Please commence drafting him. No, obviously, massive avoid. Very talented guy, but I'm not buying the health. Sorry, not. It's
kind of it's one of those situations where like he's not going to get an operation on this until like they're going to have to like drag him kicking and screaming like into the operation room. So like he's just going to do everything he can possibly do to like pitch through this. But it's just, it is what it is. Last year
it's sad. He's such a talent, but it's just not going to line up for him, I don't think.
134 innings last year were a career high for Tyler Glasnow.
Yeah.
Another guy that I'm like strongly avoiding, but I've also been told that there's other people that think he's a great buy here. Shane McClanahan, coming back from Tommy John surgery number 2. There's a lot of nuance involved with this because there are no comparables of an ace caliber pitcher returning from a second Tommy John surgery that I'm aware of. I don't really view like Walker Buehler in that camp. I don't view Jameson Taillon in that camp. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but like he's basically the best pitcher to attempt to return, or best starting pitcher to attempt to return from a second Tommy John surgery. So it's there aren't a bunch of comparables. It's a small sample, but it's just, think about your elbow or your arm as sort of like the tool of a pitcher, and you've had this massive surgery on it now twice. Like, why would you expect it to still work the same as it did back before? I don't really get and like Walker Buehler was just last year. Like it just happened. Like we all got to see how bad he was, and it was basically the exact same timetable, and he was delayed and everything. So this one just feels like people are just taking a big shot, and I have no interest in it.
People are just always going to be overly optimistic when it comes to injuries. That's just how it's going to be. They're gonna keep buying in and assuming that because he could be back, that he's going to be the same guy and he's going to be just as effective. And that's crazy and unrealistic. And I know that it's, you're not taking him as a second or third rounder, but even in the, 8th round, that's still too early. I can still there's too many other, solid players that I can get at that point who don't have his upside, but are nowhere near his amount of risk. And I just don't see he won't be on any of my teams.
I'll put it to you this way, Dave. I really hope that Glasnow and McClanahan don't like get shut down in like late February.
I know, dude.
Like, please,
it's coming. It's
please
coming.
Just make it to opening day so that they can go in the 5th round of main events, and then they can get hurt.
If only you could see the consortium group chat. Would not be something I would want to share publicly, but there's a lot of swearing going on when obvious injury risks then get hurt in training camp before they can get drafted in the main events by some silly people. So it's going to happen. Just prepare for it now. At least one of the two of them, it's going to happen.
And then, you mentioned Justin Steele here, another guy that made it back in late September.
Yeah, and it was only a min stint. And again, this is one of those things where I'm not sure if he's an avoid for me. It's one of those things I want to look into further. I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts on it. Tendonitis, not the worst thing, but it depends on whether there's something else there or not.
Yeah, I'm not projecting Justin Steele for like 180 innings or anything like that. I think he's a good enough pitcher that this is enough of a discount that I would consider him. Okay. But he's not a target by any means.
Yeah.
And we head to round 9. Christian Yelich had back surgery in mid-August and is not yet swinging a bat. But there's some positive quotes coming out about how ready Christian Yelich is going to be, even though he's not swinging a bat yet, and he's come back from back surgery. So, this one, it's I really just want to see what he looks like in the first 10 games of spring training or whatever. Specifically, is he hitting for power? Like, does it look like he's just back because, back surgery? Like, we've seen plenty of very, very high profile athletes over the years just have their entire careers derailed due to back stuff. So
yep.
I'm not interested. Again, like, to me, like, the outfielders, it's so deep. But Yelich before going down last year was just a massive value, or massive producer, I should say.
Yeah, and I think it could depend on what kind of league you're in. I think, again, he would be a good pick in a Yahoo league for me. Yep. I don't know. I don't know if I would take him in a main or not. I mean, I would. I don't know if at that point of the draft or not. As someone who has a major back injury and has for over 15 years now, it's horrible. It affects all parts of your life. It's hard to run. It's hard to, do a lot of the things that you used to do. And people don't want to perform back surgeries in general. I think that there have been some leaps forward in the last 10 years. So, because I have been keeping up on that kind of stuff, because I would still like to get back surgery myself at some point. But yeah, I don't know. It's a big question mark. But the thing is, I've noticed guys with back injuries in general, they'll miss time several times throughout the year, but it's usually not a huge amount of time, although it was for him last year. So I guess it sounds like you're more concerned about his efficacy than missing more time with injury. You're more concerned with how is this going to affect his performance, which I think is fair. But, like, I don't know, how would you compare him to, say, Randy Arozarena in Seattle? Where he's in this horrendous park for offense, and his average took a huge dive, but he's obviously healthy. So it's like they're going around kind of similar times. I mean, Yelich goes a little earlier, but less than a round ish. So, like, how do you compare that? Because they both give you power and speed.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I'm just not taking any of the outfielders going in round 9.
Okay.
And
no Ian Happ?
Like, Ian Happ's as steady as they come. Like, exactly what you're getting from Ian Happ. But it's just, I think it's just such a prevalent package of stats that you're not getting it from an everyday player 10 rounds later, but I could get a handful of strong side platoon guys in the final 10 rounds that can kind of do what he's doing when they're in the lineup. I just don't like the batting average from a outfielder that isn't going to steal 20 plus bases in the first 10 rounds there. But
the batting average of Yelich?
Of Happ.
Oh, Happ. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, Happ just always hits 243.
Yeah. Feels like he should hit higher, but yeah, that's fair.
I would take, well, actually, never mind. Who was the other guy going here?
There's Pete Crow Armstrong.
I was going to go back to other guys in round 9 that we were going to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, with Yelich, it's like he could look great early in spring training and start going in round 6.
Could
Spencer
happen.
Strider and this Dave Funnel, just before we started recording, I saw retweeted something where Spencer Strider said on a podcast this week that he expects to be facing hitters in February, and he's returning from April internal brace surgery. And yeah, like round 9, I kind of thought he'd be going a little higher, but I haven't drafted him yet. I guess I wouldn't be that surprised if he actually was back earlier than a lot of people think. That doesn't mean he's going to stay healthy or anything, but where are you at on Spencer Strider in round 9?
Yeah, I mean, so I know the internal brace is different from Tommy John, but it's kind of like sort of like a similar type procedure. I mean, so it's kind of like, do we know of anybody who's coming off of a Tommy John and an internal brace other than him and Shohei?
The combo, not off the top of my head.
Yeah. So that's something I have to look into because I don't know. It feels like two major it feels to me kind of similar to coming off of 2 Tommy Johns and why would I be in on that? I guess his timeline is going to dictate this a lot. If he's back sooner than people think, we're going to know that by March, and his price will be, higher than McClanahan and probably, and it'll skyrocket. It doesn't feel like a good risk to take to me.
Yeah, I think I'd be maybe open to it, and like I'm gonna do draft champions. I've done a few, but I haven't done any in a couple months. I'm gonna jump back in here this weekend. I think. I don't think I'll take Strider, but like, if he's going in like the 10th round of a draft champions, like maybe that's a worthwhile risk just because you can kind of backfill. But yeah, I mean,
in a DC, I could see doing that.
I honestly respect the drafting public for not pushing him up higher than this.
Yeah. I mean, but when you're talking about a 7-man bench in a 15-team, main event or something like that, it's going to be so difficult to manage that with all your other injuries and everything. And by the way, shout out to Dave Funnel, great guy. You mentioned earlier.
You can follow Dave at us at sports with a Z _nut with 2 T's at 51. And he does lots of injury related tweets.
He's a great follow for sure. Great guy too.
You mentioned Brian Wu here in round 9. I almost mentioned him. Like I didn't draft him last year due to injury concerns. I think I was right about the durability, but I actually think he paid off the draft cost because of how good he was when he pitched. I'm going to not draft him again. I wasn't going to mention him just because if you get another 120 innings with Brian Wu here, it's not like a terrible pick, but
but if you were to ask me, like, give me someone who people aren't really talking about as big injury risk, who you think is the most likely injury risk, it's Brian Wu. Like, he had forearm inflammation in August 2023, came back after a min stint, but back on the IL in late March 2024 with more elbow inflammation, returned mid-May, but was removed in his first start with more forearm tightness. Didn't miss a start, but then more forearm issues a month later after that. It's just it's not just about the amount of time that you miss. It's kind of like you can feel it building up. And I think at some point he's going to have Tommy John next year. So like, if you're asking me to predict someone to have TJ, which I don't want to put that on anyone, but he's very, very high risk in my opinion.
So the guy that would fit that for me, who I also didn't put on here, is Max Fried.
Yeah, he's also up there.
I think Tommy John number 2 is coming for Max Fried, like this year, next year, it's coming for him. Because he's just had so many forearm related designations over the years, and it doesn't show up in his innings.
Correct.
So like that's like him and Wu are just guys that I don't draft, but like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna spend time trying to convince people not to draft them because it's like, look, they're good pitchers, but to me, like they're more risky than the ADP.
Definitely.
Round 10, Mike Trout has averaged 66.5 games over the last 4 seasons. I don't know. Zach Neto, his teammate, had shoulder surgery in November. I was all about Neto pre-shoulder surgery, and
I love that guy so much last year. Like he was one of my favorite picks last year.
Yeah, but I'm just completely off of him now.
Just in general, guys, players coming off of wrist and shoulder surgery, hitters, you need to avoid them the following year. Neto will be back on my radar in 2026, but 2025 he's definitely off. His power is going to be affected for sure. And not much to say about Trout. The lower body injuries it's just been an onslaught for the last several years, and it doesn't seem to be letting up. All the people who just kind of a reminder, don't take your victory laps in April if you're going to take victory laps at all. All the people who are victory lapping Trout, imagine not drafting Mike Trout in the 5th round, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, come on,
man. I was doing I think I did a pod like a week or 2 before his injury, and I like doubled down on fading him.
Yeah.
I was just like, it's still going to happen. Like,
yeah.
It's just kind of the sucker pick on the board.
But like people were acting like the reason that people avoided him was because we thought he wasn't a good player. Like, no, he's like a Hall of Fame player, but like the whole reason you're avoiding him is because he's going to get hurt at some point. Don't victory lap that in April. Like wait till August.
Yeah, I mean, wait until the NFBC puts the funds in your account and then take your victory lap.
Exactly.
Another guy in round 10 that you added, pitcher for the New York Mets.
Yes. Cody Senga. And this is a huge lesson, I hope, for some people last year. This is why you don't stash guys coming in, especially starting pitchers who are coming into the season already injured. Those are the worst. There's the 2 worst investments you can make in fantasy baseball are starting pitchers who are coming into the season on the IL who have an arm injury. The second is, as we discussed earlier, the guys who usually miss a lot of time with injuries who then stay healthy for a season and their price goes way up, and then you're buying at that elevated level where they have to now stay healthy to pay it off. Those are the kinds of guys you want to avoid. And yeah, Senga was supposed to be, was he supposed to be back like late April, early May or something, and he was out until late July. But the thing is, he didn't have surgery. They just gave him a PRP injection on his shoulder. Anytime I see PRP, that's like huge warning flags go off. It's basically like they're trying to put a Band-Aid on something that requires a lot more than a Band-Aid to fix. So for me, I think that Senga's probably just going to miss more time this year.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And he's also had plenty of control issues as a big leaguer. Look at this, Dave. Round 11, round 12, round 13. There are no landmines. Round 11, round 12, round 13.
Well, I mean, I don't think we covered all the landmines. I think we covered some of them. Yeah, no, you're safe. If you're drafting rounds 11 through 13, you're totally good. There's no landmines.
Generally, like honestly, like the way I was doing this is sort of the lower we got, then you get a little bit more wiggle room if you're one of these guys.
Yeah, for sure. You're more willing to take a risk in round 15 than you are in round 5, for sure.
Right. So we weren't grading as harshly on the risky guys at this portion, but we do have a guy in round 14 that I think people should be careful with. Like Brandon Woodruff, healthy Brandon Woodruff to me is just an ace, just a guy I love having on my fantasy teams. But, he had a very serious shoulder surgery in October 2023, and they're already basically laying the groundwork for he's probably not going to be ready opening day. And that's what, like 18 months after the surgery, basically. Like they're saying he's not going to be ready. And this was one where they gave him a 2-year deal where they paid for the injured year, hoping to get, something close to vintage Brandon Woodruff over, I would have guessed, like a 4-month stretch or something this year. But I would just say, like, be prepared to have to stash him for like all of April and not get anything. And then even from there, who knows what you get. You don't know. You have no idea if you're getting ace Brandon Woodruff when you do get him, and you don't know when you're getting him. So this is just another one where, like, at least he's not going as high as like Glasnow and McClanahan, but I mean, I think he's as risky, if not riskier, than those guys.
Yeah, no, I think he's riskier. I mean, this just really falls under the I'm not drafting guys who are coming into the season with an injury. They're already saying he's not going to be ready for the start of the season. So pretty much off my draft board, I would say. Like I'm not really looking to stash those kind of guys. Starting pitchers with an arm injury, shoulder. Either way, yep, I'm out.
Clark Schmidt also going in 14th round. He's only thrown over 100 innings once in his 7-year pro career.
7 years.
Like I'm counting like since he was drafted, he's only thrown.
Oh, well, I mean, like he's really. I mean, like he came up for a couple innings in 2020 and 2021, but like 2022 he came up as like a reliever and they started a couple of games. I don't think he was really a full-time starter until 2023, right?
Well, he was a starter in the minors.
Okay. But this is one that we're gonna be on opposite sides of. I'm very interested in Clark Schmidt in round 14. I loved the skills growth that I saw from him last year. A lot more, swing and miss in the profile there with multiple good off speed pitches. He's kind of in that 94. Well, he doesn't throw a fastball, but his sinker is like 94. He doesn't throw too hard where I'm concerned that he's going to miss time. Although as we keep going here, this is where, like, if there's hard throwers going in rounds 15 to 30, I'm much more willing to take them at this point because I'm not as reliant on them. But I really like Clark Schmidt, honestly. Like he's a guy that we had drafted on our 5th place overall team this year in the main event. And when he went down, that was it took us a long time to fill that hole. It was really not until Spencer Schwellenbach, I think, that we really kind of found a replacement for him. And I'm sure Zach is going to cut the part out of me saying fill that hole and troll me with it in our group chat, but such is life.
Yeah, I mean, I agree about the pitcher. I loved him as a prospect for years and years and years, and he could just never stay healthy. And then he stayed healthy.
Did he have a lot of injury issues in the minors too?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something I was not aware of. Like what were do you remember what the injuries were?
Just your normal bad injuries.
Like you remember this like arm injury, shoulder,
yeah,
or like,
I mean it was arm stuff. I think he's
I don't care as much about like hamstring and stuff like that.
No, of course not. I didn't prepare my full
That's
okay.
on
Clark Schmidt, but he like I get like at 14th round, who cares? Like not who cares, but
yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
I definitely back what you're saying about the skills and the pitcher because I've liked him, like I said, for a long time. I just don't know if he's meant to be a 120, 130 inning guy or not. But
I guess at this point in the draft, in round 14, do you need him to be a 140 inning guy? I guess is the question.
I mean, I just like taking lots of guys that I think can be 160 inning guys. And
sure.
there might be spots where I take a guy and I don't think he's going to get to that, but I don't know. I don't have a problem with you taking Clark Schmidt in the 14th round.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Final player that I mentioned, the only player from round 15, Josh Jung, has never played 125 games as a pro, like full stop. Hasn't played over 125 games and has only played 80 plus games once. And
you're including minor leagues in this too, right?
Yeah. Yes. Like since he was drafted as a position player,
gotcha.
Like he just is always getting operations, is always missing time. And the skills are starting to deteriorate. And like I said, third base is just loaded as hell. And there's a lot of guys that I think are going to produce like Josh Jung that aren't this expensive.
Yeah. That's more like where he goes is kind of the area that I'm more interested in taking. There's some arms that I really like going around there, but it doesn't matter with him. He's coming off of not one, but 2 wrist surgeries this offseason. And I don't have any interest in a guy who's a lot of his value is tied to his power. You know, his power is going to be pretty far down, I would think, coming off of 2 wrist surgeries. I mean, you saw it with Tatis in his first year coming off of his 2 wrist surgeries. Like his power was down that year. If anything, you know, he could be a nice buy low in 2026. But for next year, I'm out on Jung.
Very good. All right. Cleveland Guardians talk, Dave. Let's wrap this up with the.
Oh boy.
You know, I want to ask you about John Kenzie Noel.
I want to ask you about John Kenzie Noel. I want you to sell me on John Kenzie because I would love to be excited about him, but I mean it's just he has grown a bit with his K rate. You know, because like there's times in the in 20. What was it? No, I guess he hasn't grown. I thought he had. All right. Yeah, because he was at 32% last year. You don't see, he's kind of like a Joey Gallo. Like he's got monstrous power, but is he ever going to make enough contact to really hold down a job outside of being a specialist versus lefties?
He had way less of a strikeout issue in the minors than Joey Gallo did.
Okay.
It
definitely improved in AAA.
Like, he's got a couple stints where it's over 30, but a lot of those are small samples. The big thing that kind of sold me on him, I wasn't even that in on him coming into last year, but he just got so much better at AAA as the season went on. And at the point where they actually promoted him, like he'd been striking out at a 15% clip, I think, for over a month at AAA when they promoted him.
I remember something like that. Yeah.
He's got a elite bat speed. It's a bit longer of a swing. So strikeouts are always going to be there.
Yeah.
I just think there's kind of, maybe like a Marcelo Ozuna type of, ceiling, like if it kind of all came together for him. But I also know how much the Guardians love to mix and match.
Yeah.
And he's obviously got a cannon, but it doesn't add up to plus defense or anything just because he's got a cannon in the outfield. So
right.
If he were off to a decent start in April, could you see Vogt? Like let's say, okay, so he struck out 32% of the time as a rookie. Yeah. Let's say he's striking out like 26% of the time
in
April and producing. Like could you picture the Guardians actually giving him just sort of a permanent spot at like cleanup or number 5, or like do you think they would just keep using him as sort of this short, like he always plays against lefties and then plays against, a third of the righties?
Yeah. No, I think, we'll have to see what they end up doing because there's a lot of talk about that we're going to be trading Josh Naylor and Lane Thomas because Lane Thomas doesn't really fit what they're looking for in a center fielder because he's got bad defense and they like really good defensive center fielders. But I don't know if they're going to spend any money, like they traded away Jimenez and people are like, oh, let's see how they repurpose this money. And I'm one of those people, but I'm like, the other side of me is like, they're not going to spend shit. They're just going to, Dolan's are going to pocket that money and he doesn't care. I think if we go into the year with a bunch of question marks, then there's definitely a chance that he can run away with it. And I'm glad we had this talk because I guess I was kind of overlooking him. And now that I'm looking into it a bit, 32% is not, I thought it was higher. I'll be honest with you. And I thought that his K rate was higher in the minors too. I remember it was higher. And then, like you said, he had that run that he went on where he wasn't striking out much at all. If he can translate that, then I think that they can give him a permanent spot.
And shouts to Jenny Butler because I know she would love to be able to talk John Kenzie Noel with us. Now, Dave, 3 kind of non-sexy or I don't know, 3 kind of unproven position players. Kyle Manzardo, Brian Rocchio, and Bo Naylor. Of those 3, who are you most interested in for 2025? And you're welcome to say none of the above.
It's not none of the above, but it's almost none of the above. I do have some interest in Manzardo. I do think that there's a world where, his power definitely came along last year. Which was always the part of the game that I was kind of most concerned about with him. I was kind of concerned that he might not ever be more than a 15 to 20 power, 20 homer guy. But he might be. I don't know. I'm not convinced that he definitely can't hit lefties, but I do think that he's going to get everyday playing time versus righties. But versus lefties, I'm not sure if they're going to give him run at first. But I think he profiles as a guy who there's been years in the minors where he's hit lefties. So I think the jury's still out on him. Whereas with Rocchio, even though Rocchio had a very nice, hot hitting end of the season, nothing in his profile really excites me. And kind of same with Bo Naylor. Like Bo Naylor, the fact that he's a catcher, so you don't really need a good average from him, and he does run a bit, but I don't know. I just watching him, I'm not seeing it. And with young guys, sometimes it comes together quickly, but I'm not seeing, there's nothing really with those 2 guys for me to grab onto where I'm excited. I think Manzardo would be a nice DC pick late. I don't know if he's a guy I'd want to take in a main event just because I might want a better corner infielder than that. I think he might be like last couple round possible lotto pick, but I don't know.
Yeah, I was honestly surprised Manzardo's steamer projection was as rosy as it was.
Yeah.
240, 327, 440, so 119 WRC plus, 22% strikeout rate, 18 homers, but they're only giving him 99 games. The problem with Manzardo, to me, I think he will sit against lefties, just like at least first couple months, probably.
Yeah.
The other problem is that he's UT only.
He's going to get that's a guy who I'm very confident will get first base eligibility, though, because I think that they're very interested in trading away Josh Naylor, and even if not, I think they're definitely going to give Manzardo playing time at first base versus Rays.
Yeah, I think they would like to trade Josh Naylor too. I just don't know what the offers are going to be, but I guess the Guardians are the type of team that will just trade a guy even if the market is telling them you should hold this guy. If they're getting too expensive, they'll just trade him anyway. So
to be fair, their front office does a great job. I mean, the owners suck, but
yeah,
the front office makes really good trades in general, unless it's with Tampa. Anytime we make a trade with Tampa, I'm always skeptical. I mean, I will never get over the Junior Caminero trade. So
nor should you, but I don't hate Rocchio like DCs, especially because shortstops suck so much. Like I at least think Rocchio is going to play a lot and not kill you. Like if he kills you, it's going to be in like home runs and RBI. But I don't think he's going to kill your batting average. I think he could like sneakily steal 20 bases this year, just because I think he's going to play a lot. But I don't mind Rocchio just because of how bad shortstop is, kind of in that range.
Man, I liked shortstop so much last year, and then this year I was looking at it and I'm just like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah. I mean, it's like in DCs especially, like you just can't get real shortstops after like pick 500. Like everyone just comes with just like crazy like downside. Okay, final question, Dave.
Yeah.
Do you think the Guardians actually, you know what? I'm gonna flip this question slightly on the fly. Do you think it's more likely that the Guardians stretch out Cade Smith this or like heading into this year, or trade Emmanuel Clase this offseason?
Ooh, I would have to say trade Clase. I don't know how likely either are, but unless you're hearing something that I'm not, I kind of, when I saw your question, I looked into it a bit because I follow a lot of Guardians insiders and prospect guys and really good follows for local people here. I did not see anybody talking about Cade Smith possibly being stretched out, and it definitely felt like he lost efficacy when they stretched him out to where it doesn't seem like that's what they want to do with him. I do think he would be a really good closer though. And it might be, and again, I hope nothing's wrong with Clase, but if there is, maybe if there is something that they see that's not obvious that would show up on a physical if he got traded, but I could see them cashing in on Clase, and if they can get a huge package for him and moving Cade Smith to closer.
Yeah, I only mentioned the stretching him out thing because my memory, I've talked to so many people. I think it was Eno that came on at the end of the year and mentioned him as like I was asking for relievers that he thought could be conversion candidates as starters. I think he mentioned him. But there's absolutely no reporting I've seen to suggest.
Yeah.
So like, I guess it's like he's such an obvious like relief ace. Yeah. But it just sort of, where does he fit on a like main event roster?
Yeah, kind of looking for a reason to draft him, kind of thing.
Yeah, because I've this is something. Shouts.
It might not be a bad DC pick. I don't know about a main event pick though.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Apples to oranges when it comes to guys like that. But like at first pitch in the presentation that Steve-O Swerve did with Rob and Batfoot Crazy, they were talking about just it's really, really dangerous to start three relievers, because you fall behind,
Yeah.
Obviously, sometimes you have to start three relievers. Sometimes you have to start four relievers. But each time you're not starting seven starters, you're taking a hit in the Ks and the wins. Mm-hmm. So like, it can almost be a trap to roster those types of guys in those leagues. But he's really talented, obviously.
Yeah, I hear you. And you're not losing a lot in Ks with him. Assuming he gets into the game, like he can strike out 2 or 3 in an inning easily. I love him too. So he's the kind of guy who, if he does at some point take over as a closer, like he could be a top 3 closer in baseball. So, he's the kind of guy that you blow your fab budget on. Because he's definitely the number 2 in line there. Like there's no question that if something happens with Clase, they will go to Cade Smith next. So, I hear that. I can't give you a reason to draft him in a main event as of right now.
Well, Dave, anything you want to mention before we sign off here?
2 things actually. So one is, are they really not going to make Tristan McKenzie get the surgery he needs? They're just going to like roll with him again and just.
Didn't you see Stephen Votes talking about how he's like gonna have this awesome year now.
Why?
He let me try to dig it up.
I mean,
I saw it. I think I saw Ian's perspective talking about Jeff Zimmerman's mining the news. It's all blending together. But so Tristan McKenzie from Zimmerman's mining the news.
I think Tristan last winter was still recovering from injury and just not quite caught his stride this last season for Tristan. He's got a healthy body, healthy arm bullshit. He's having a great offseason. I know it's going to continue to go that way. I'm expecting Tristan to come in ready to rock in good year and hopefully earn a spot in our rotation. We all know how good Tristan McKenzie can be, and the best version of him makes him the best version of us. So really excited for Tristan. Yeah, no.
Dave, he says he's having a great offseason, and he says, I know it's going to continue that way.
Yeah, yeah.
He knows it's going to continue.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. If there's anybody, I don't think there's anybody I'm avoiding more than Tristan McKenzie this year. Like that is.
I've been avoiding him. I've been avoiding him since like the very first sign of trouble. Like,
yeah,
how long ago that was?
Good Lord, man. I mean, and his people talked him out of getting the surgery that he needed, and now it's just a shit show because he could have been back by now. He could have been back and ready to go instead of just lying to himself that he's ready to go. But thoughts on Luis Ortiz as a prospect guy? Like when he was coming up, him going from the Pirates system to the Guardians? Do you think there's a little bit of sleeper potential there, or is he just not? He's not the guy.
I mean, I'm way more interested in him just with the change of scenery. He wasn't a prospect that anyone really cared about until he first came up to the big leagues and like was showing just that ridiculous stuff at the end of 2022 or 2023. 2022 probably. So like he was just kind of a late bloomer as a prospect. But like the stuff is pretty crazy. He kind of went away from missing bats last year. So just like to me, like I just like it when teams like the Guardians or the Brewers or the Rays like go out of their way to just be like, let's bring this guy in, because they definitely, like, even before they get the guy into the facility, they've got a plan. They've talked about what they're going to do with him if they acquire him. So like there's definitely a plan in place. I don't know what the plan is, but yeah, I wasn't that interested in Pittsburgh just because he can be a whip killer. He's didn't strike a ton of guys out, if I recall last year. But yeah, I mean, I trust the Guardians with pitching for sure.
Okay, because I'm kind of not hating the idea of using a last round pick on him. Two other quick ones. Ryan Webb, were you surprised that they didn't protect him in the Rule 5? I was surprised he didn't get picked. I
wasn't really surprised.
No, I mean, I know not big upside guy, but I mean, I don't know, for an organization that needs depth arms at AAA, I feel like he was a pretty MLB ready one. Like shitty fastball, but he's got some off speed pitches that I think can keep him in the game at least.
Yeah, I mean, obviously other teams didn't see much there.
Yeah, maybe not. All right, who's your favorite? Like, what Guardians prospect gets you excited? And it can be someone that people don't talk about a lot, or it can be an obvious one. Whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but
I know you like Aliman.
Yeah, I do. The guy that I'll just mention for this, because we're mostly talking redraft 2025.
Yeah,
I mentioned I love Noel, but kind of conflicting with that is I also really like Jonathan Rodriguez.
Really? Okay.
And another guy where like, yeah, he strikes out a lot, but his data at AAA last year was just insane. Like he was just like performing, kind of almost like a Matt Wallner type of level.
He lowered the K rate too. I mean, they brought him up for a cup of coffee.
Yeah. So there's a lot of outfielders there. Obviously, some are kind of hopefully on the way out of playing time, and Obviously, you hope Chase DeLauder's healthy, but
Please God.
like Jonathan Rodriguez, I think, and also I think Steamer had him as like a above league average hitter.
Who was that?
Jonathan Rodriguez.
Yeah. Oh, Steamer has him.
Yeah. Like he could easily hit, like if he just had the playing time, I think Rodriguez could hit 20 homers this year, but I don't think the playing time's there without an injury, but
I could see it happening though.
Yeah. Like it's just super cheap power to me and like DCs and just a guy to keep an eye on for fab. But I really like Angel Ganao. Middle infielder. I think Jason Churio is
Yeah, that's a guy I'm excited about.
Luis Morejo, first base prospect in the lower levels.
That is one I don't know unless I'm just thinking about unless I'm not hearing your pronunciation the same. What was the name?
Morejo, Merejo. He's kind of a data darling in the lower levels, and then I like their catcher Cooper Ingle.
Really?
Kind of the opposite of Bo Naylor. He's 22, hits left-handed, finished the year at Double-A, but he's really, really good hit tool. And
makes good contact and he walks a lot, it looks like.
Yeah. So I mean the Guardians, like every time I'm updating my prospect rankings, like I have to update the team top 20s as well. The Guardians really pretty much every single time have more than 20 guys in my top 400, which is there's usually only like 4 or 5 teams that have more than 20 guys in the top 400, and the Guardians are always one of them. So like there's always guys I love in that.
They never have those like elite tier guys, but they usually have a big collection of guys, like a lot of guys that are all MLB talent guys that they can see, becoming MLB regulars at some point. So they tend to make those kinds of picks and trades to get those kind of players. I wish they'd swing for the fences once in a while. Hopefully Bazana is that guy for us.
They swung for the fences with Espino, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, that's not great. I wish they would have traded him and Valera when they could have.
Yeah. But I mean that, like you said, they're very well run, except at the very top.
I'm also as a guy for draft and holds, and maybe as a late pick in mains, depending on where our rotation is at that point. I don't know. Joey Cantillo was a guy I had kind of written off because of his control, and it's still an issue. But man, that curveball is so damn good. And anytime a guy has a pitch that good, if they can just pair it with something else, granted he needs the control still, but he's not a guy that I am totally writing off anymore.
No, I would have asked you about him, but I talked about him a few pods ago. But I've always just kind of kept giving him chances, even though the walk rate said not to, because nobody cared about him. And I think you and I have even talked about him in our.
Yeah, I think we have earlier.
I think he's just gonna probably be in that rotation either until he doesn't throw enough strikes or gets hurt.
I think he's gonna have. If I were putting an innings pitched amount, I would say I don't know if he's gonna reach 100 innings, but I think he's gonna have not insignificant innings with the Guardians this year. I think it's going to be, 70 plus.
Well, very good, Dave.
All right.
Do you want to let people know where they can follow along with your opinions?
As long as some of us are still on Twitter anyways, it seems like a lot of people are heading over to bluer skies these days, but I'm at X, I guess, instead of Twitter, at RunDMCD. Add that D on the end. I do still get tweeted by people thinking that I'm the band Run DMC, which is always fun. And then I retweet them saying subtract that D. But you can find me there. Justin tells me that we'll be starting up the Friends with Fantasy Benefits pod in the new year. Jake always likes to tease me that we're gonna get back to doing our podcast, but I'm not holding out hope there. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, James. Always a blast talking to you. I love that you make me think about stuff, and that I need to get going. I feel like I'm doing more this off season earlier than I have in other years, because the last 2 years in Glarf, I was not remotely ready to draft in mid-February, and I'm promising myself that I'm going to be ready this time. So this is good. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being so generous with your time and all the great injury insights. Really enjoyed this one. I know people are going to love this one. And shouts to Jake, shouts to Tony. Hope to see you guys in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah, we'll see you for sure.
Thanks to everyone for listening. I'll be back with another episode next week.